I'm Marylou Forrest of Aloha Sea Glass, and I live in Santa Cruz, California, very close to Capitola. And I love living here because I'm directly across the street from the beach. And so anytime I want to get some vitamin C, I can walk across the street, down a few doors, and I'm right there. I've been married to the same man for over 30 years, and we have a wonderful daughter, Madeline, who is 26 now. She's not really a beachcomber, but I did actually get my husband to beachcomb with me in Puerto Rico, and he found the best pieces. He even found a doll arm. And I have worked as a registered nurse for 35 years as the charge nurse in labor and delivery at a local hospital down in Watsonville. I retired about a year ago so I could pursue my passions, which are taking jewelry classes, making jewelry, beachcombing, and doing festivals. I got started with sea glass probably 15 years ago. We were on a family trip to Kauai, and my husband and daughter and her girlfriend were always out surfing, and I was someone who never got in the water back then. And so I would walk the beaches, and one day I looked down in the sand and I saw sea glass, and I thought, I might as well just pick this up and collect it. And so I did, and I brought it home, put it in a shoebox, and put it away for several years. After that, I became obsessed with collecting sea glass and have traveled lots of different places searching for treasures. The tribe of people that I've met through sea glassing and the world of sea glass was really the tribe I've probably been looking for my entire life. And that group has such a spirit of aloha. They take you into their homes, they embrace you, they give you gifts, they give presents. They're just the most delightful tribe of people. So that's when I decided, even though I don't live in Hawaii, that I would call myself Aloha Sea Glass, and I'm really happy that I did. I do not consider myself a school-trained jeweler. I took a weekend soldering class, and then I was cut loose in a community studio to figure things out on my own. I do things my way. I'm not saying it's the way everyone should do it or if it's the actual correct way, but I end up with pretty good product at the end of the game, so I'll just keep doing what I'm doing, and I'm always looking for new techniques, new things to learn. I love to experiment.
First thing we're going to do is I'm starting with a nice flat piece of seafoam sea glass. It's always helpful if it's flat on the back. And then this is called bezel wire, and it's fine silver, and it comes in different heights. And I believe this height is going to be perfect for this piece of glass. So what we first do is we make a frame around the piece of sea glass with the bezel wire. And we're going to fit it around as tight as we can because you don't want loose bezels. That's a pretty good fit. And so then we take a Sharpie. And then I'm going to take these Joyce Chen shears. Every jeweler has a pair. And cut it. Then we will double check. And it's pretty close. So we'll give that a try. What we have to do is fit these two pieces together perfectly. We can kind of go back and forth until they just fit perfect. It doesn't have to be the same shape right now. We are soldering with a Smith handy heat torch on a charcoal block. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put a little bit of flux on our seam. It allows the solder to flow, and it does keep the metal clean also. And I already have my solder cut. So I have my two little pieces of solder placed on the seam, and if they move, we can grab them. I'm going to turn on the torch. So first we're going to just heat the outside, otherwise the solder may jump. If it jumps, we can push it back with our little solder pick here. And then we're done. It goes in the quench, which is just plain water. Now it's cool. I put the seam towards the bottom of the ring, and then I just pulled the bezel up over it. So this is a pretty snug bezel. You can't really see any space between the silver and the glass, so it's a pretty perfect fit. So I am drawing a line around where I'm going to saw. Okay, so this is a jeweler's saw. And then this is some burr lube. It just kind of makes things cut easier. When I first started, I hated sawing. And what I found I was doing was just gripping the saw. But the best method is to just hold it very gently and just start going up and down. Just very gently. See, I can just move my fingers all around. Sawing till we're all the way through, and ta-da! So what I'm doing is I just want to clean the surface of my metal very well before I attempt to solder it. The cleaner the metal, the easier the solder. So this is a Fordham flex shaft, and this is just a piece of sandpaper. And what I'm going to do is just sand off all the crud and my felt pen and anything else that might be on here. So we're going to solder the frame to the back plate like that. So this is clean and flat, and now we're going to just sand the bottom of our bezel to make it nice and flat. This is just a piece of sandpaper glued to a piece of cardboard. So we're going to sand in kind of a figure 8. Check it. So then we want to look and make sure we don't have any big gaps between the metal. Solder does not fill gaps. It only glues things together. So what we're going to do is we're going to place our back plate on the brick. We're going to cover it with flux. So now I'm just painting a nice little layer of flux inside the bezel, and I'm going to set it down, and I'm going to place it exactly where I want it. So we're going to just be placing little pieces of pre-cut solder around the frame, on the inside of the frame. Kind of the same amount of space as they are apart from each other, if that makes sense. Kind of like a dotted line. So we're just trying to heat everything slowly. The flux is starting to bubble a little. And as things start to get hot, you'll see the flux turn from white to kind of glossy. See how the flux is now clear? Just keep going round and round. And then you can kind of start to zoom in on your seam. If you point the torch too high, you melt the top of your bezel off. See? Oh, did you see that? The solder flowed. See it right there? You'll just see it get sucked into that seam. There it went. We want to make sure that the solder has flowed all the way around. So we don't want to touch it because it's hot. We're going to put it in here, and it got quenched. So next we're going to go over to the pickle pot, and we're going to drop it in and give it a few minutes to get clean. This is my pickle pot. It's already heated, and I just drop it in. And then I have baking soda and water to neutralize the acid that's in the pickle. After that, we're going to take our trusty dental floss, and we're going to check the fit and make sure our bezel is not too tall. So I pop my glass in. It's a perfect fit. And now, if you can see, there's all this extra silver because sea glass is not perfect. So now we're going to go in and take off the extra silver around the glass. So the way I do it is I use a Sharpie and I eyeball it. And so I just kind of look and I go, okay, so little metal needs to come off there. Some more over here. So we're just get warm, so you set it down. The metal, cool it off. So now there's a pretty thick edge around the top, so we're going to take some sandpaper on my little split mandrel again and sand the top off. Okay, now we're going to test the fit again to see if we have taken off enough metal. So always use your dental floss, because if you don't and your your glass gets stuck, then you'll have to drill a hole in the back and push it out, and then you'll have a hole. So I use a second color felt pen, the second round, so I can see where I need to grind this time. So I think the contour is good. I love these shears, so I'm just gonna, since I've done this 100 times before, I'm just going to slowly trim. So at this point, I like to go back to the grinder just because it's faster. So now that we've ground off the excess silver, we're going to start sanding. It's just taking off any rough edges that the grinder left. It's all very smooth around the edge, and the bezel is all very smooth. So now we're going to make the ring shank. Okay, so I'm gonna just roll this through so you can get a good. Yeah, this is gonna give a nice imprint. Okay, so I've already pre-textured some 18 gauge sterling silver strip for our ring shank. We're going to use my miter jig to make sure that the ends are completely flat. So you put that in there, and you put it like this. Line it up in the little groove. Screw it all together. And then you're going to want to take off the file and file it flat. A lot of shears and cutting devices will not leave a very flush edge. Take it out and flip it over to the other side. Trusty ring mandrel. And we're going to bend the ring around. And then we're going to hit it with the Delrin hammer. Anyway, we're trying to form it round. So at this point, you could solder it all the way together, but then it's a little bit harder to attach your bezel to it because of all the texture in this. So I think what we're going to do is form it round and then file the edges off and solder it that way. Okay, so here's our ring, and we're going to need to solder it. But in order to do that, we want to take these edges down and make them so it'll solder on flush. So we're taking out the sword. So what we're going to do is filed nice and flat, so it'll fit rather nicely on the back of our ring. But I want to take off the sharp edges on these corners and on the very back. So when the person is wearing the ring, this little inside lip is not sharp. That looks good, and I do everything by feel, so just give it a good feel. Okay, so that ought to look perfect on the back of that ring. So then we're going to solder this together before it'll go in the tumbler. So we're going to do what they call sweat soldering. I'm going to first apply a little bit of flux to where I want my solder to go. So we're going to melt the solder on the ring shank. And I've placed 2 pieces of solder, easy solder right here. So what I'm going to do is ball them up. Just gonna, there we go. I'm going to pick up the ball with my solder pick. And then you have to heat your ring shank up. Placed it there. Just want to move it a little. There we go. Grab the other piece. There we go. And we're going to just try to get the solder to spread across that little area we filed. There we go. This is the tricky part. You have to get everything lined up. So when I'm lining up a ring shank, I look from above. I look this way. I look this way. I kind of look every way. So what we want to do is we want to heat the bottom of the ring, not the shank. Because when we do that, it'll draw the solder down. And our flux is starting to bubble white. Trying to evenly heat up everything underneath. And we're going to just see, hopefully, the little flash of silver when the solder flows. Sometimes you can get in and kind of point it. There it went. And there that solder flowed there too. Oh my goodness, we lucked out. So we're going to take it and drop it in water, and then it'll go back in the pickle. Okay, so at this point, you can add a patina to the silver before it goes in the tumbler to work harden it or not. This, whoops, is my magnetic tumbler, as you can see. Oops. That goes in here. So the pins act like a million little hammers to harden the sterling silver. Oh, there we go. So the next step is we're going to take denatured alcohol and clean the inside of the bezel. And then, since we don't want the silver to tarnish underneath, we will be adding a coating of Protect-A-Clear. And we just paint it in. It's self-level, so you don't really have to worry about it. You let this dry at least an hour, and then you apply a second coat and let that dry. And you can either cure it in an oven for an hour at 180 degrees, or you can let it cure for 5 days. Now we're going to set the glass. So I use a little Windex, believe it or not. And so our glass is nice and clean. And then we're just going to pop it right in and push it to the back. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is push the bezel over, and there are several different tools to do that. So I'm putting this in what is called a ball vise. I'm using leather to protect the metal, and the nice thing about this is it moves all around. So this is a bezel pusher. So then we just gently, I like to work opposite, so we're going to push here. And then we're going to push here. We're going to spin this, working on the sides. And if I have a part that's difficult, that won't push over, then I can bring out the big tool. This is a Fordham hammer, and instead of going around like the flex shaft, it hammers. So there's a few little bits that didn't go into place properly, so I will just hammer them in. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Our stone is not moving, so then I'm going to take the ring out, and this is called a burnisher. We're just going round and round and burnishing the edge over. I'm looking for any parts of the bezel that's not laid down close. So now I want to remove all these marks that I made with the hammer and with the bezel pusher. Okay, so then we're going to use a little rubber wheel. Put it on to take that edge off. This is my other Fordham, different petal. And I'm trying to stay off the glass. These don't really harm the glass. Pretty good all the way around. And so I'm just going to wipe off the little bit of debris. And you should always wear a mask when you're using any kind of grinding anything. Looks pretty good. And then I'm not into a super high polish shine, so I take a brass brush and just kind of blend what we just did into the rest of the metal. And there we have our ring. What I call the candy drawer. I got the right drawer, good. And this is just a very small part of my collection. This is all from Northern California, except for these big guys are from CM England. These are all jewelry quality pieces. The rest of the candy shops, these are a lot of my English multis. And then I have, this is glass from around the world: Russia, Japan, Puerto Rico, Greece. Those are my little ones. A lot of them, at least. This is my unsorted Davenport jewelry quality pieces that I'm willing to part with.
Here's some of my jewelry. These little kind of diorama, little aquarium pieces are some of my favorite to do. I make the embellishments, the mermaids, the seaweed from silver metal clay, and I have such a fun time putting all the different pieces together. This piece has a really fun texture on the outside. I tried. That's a lovely piece of English glass. And then this piece features two pieces from Davenport. The blue and white is a very classic Davenport pattern, and so I put a little Davenport guy at the top for the bail. But yeah, super fun. And here's another one that features some of my handmade metal clay pieces. This piece is called a water casting, where you drop molten silver by the droplet into ice water. And these, I call these little guys bubbles. And that's a lovely piece of English multi there, turquoise multi. This ring has the backplate with one of my favorite patterns. It's actually made with netting from the fabric store. So I embed the netting into the metal with my rolling mill. And this has orange and purple sea glass from Davenport. These are handmade little elements. This ring features my favorite color, a big, bold turquoise nugget from CM England. And each one of these little balls is made and then hammered down and then soldered on by hand. And then I use my little jeweler's saw to cut the edges out. One of my favorite rings. Look at that color. Oh. These are the latest thing I've been making. I call them little mini cuffs. And they're made with very thick 8-gauge silver. And this one is a red from England, a little pale rainbow multi from CM England, and then my favorite color, a turquoise. So these are the latest addition to my shop. And I'm just crazy about making them. I think I made 25 of them. These earrings have 24 karat gold applied to them, and it comes in very, very thin sheets, and the process is called kumbu. And if you put a dark patina on it, the gold really, really pops out. And once again, you can see how I spend hours matching my earring pieces, so they are near perfection for something that nature's created.